absolutely. Now, we're going to start this. First, thank you for coming on the show. I mean, this is huge to have a PT on the show. And people in my line of work and coaches and parents and athletes, there's so much information out there, they kind of get lost. And they'll rely on the coach and they forget you're kind of the cornerstone of how this whole thing works. They'll go to their orthopedic doctor and they'll go to that, and that's fine. Their ortho is fine. But the PT is the kind of the boots on the ground guy. You're the guy that is like, no. Biomechanically, this is how it works. So let's talk about what a physical therapist is. You're a physical therapist, which means you have a clinical doctor, correct?
Correct.
Where'd you go to school?
University of Miami.
University of Miami. All right, go Hurricanes.
That's right.
That's right. Good PT school there, I assume, because that's super. I mean, their medical department, all that is massive out there.
Yeah.
What got you into this? Why did you want to do this? Were you an athlete?
Yeah, I was. Growing up, I always played soccer, so my background is in soccer. I grew up in Europe. Soccer and cycling is my background. And then I was very lucky. My freshman year in undergrad, I ran into a guy in chemistry class, or actually in chemistry class, I overheard him talk that he was working for the football team. And this was at Rutgers University, New Jersey.
So your undergrad was in Rutgers?
Undergrad was in Rutgers. My graduate schooling for physical therapy at the University of Miami. So after chemistry class, 2 years into school, 2 years into my freshman year, go up there and he's like, hey, I heard you talk about the football team, and you work for them. What do you do? It's like, well, I'm a student athletic trainer. Help out in the training room and all the football players. I was like, that sounds incredible. And I hadn't declared a major yet, but I was thinking about doing exercise science and sports studies. Mainly because I didn't know what to do, right? As an 18-year-old kid, I didn't know what to do, but I was obsessed with sports, and sports what I played. It's like, a career in sports science must be great. So I called up the athletic training department, and 2 weeks later, I was working for them. So I did that all throughout my freshman, sophomore, junior year, worked for the football team. And then senior year, worked for both men's and women's soccer and lacrosse. And so had 4 years of experience in the athletic training group there. And along the way, you get to meet many different people and worked with physical therapists as well, did chattering in physical therapy clinics, and mostly on the sports physical therapy side. And just over time, just learned that that's probably a little bit more of my calling, to be more in a clinic rather than work for a sports team, like in an athletic training room. And next thing you know, I'm applying to physical therapy schools and got my doctorate in physical therapy, eventually became a sports certified clinical specialist. Right. And always worked my time in sports physical therapy, 15 years now.
So what was your undergrad actually in?
Exercise science and sports studies.
Exercise science. So you got your undergrad. Mm-hmm. And then, and here's where the thing, I had to think about this a little bit. So a physician, right, gets their undergrad, typically in pre-med or something like that, chemistry or whatever. They get their undergrad and then they go to med school, right, to be a physician this way. You, same thing, you got your undergrad, sports science, right? You said sports science? Exercise sports science. And then you went to graduate school to be a clinician.
Correct.
Physician goes this way, clinician goes that way. Still with a doctorate degree, not an MD, but you're called a clinical PhD, a clinical doctor, correct?
No, it's not a PhD. It's a doctorate of physical therapy.
Okay, it's a doctorate of physical therapy.
So we are doctors, but we're just doctors in physical therapy. Right. Just like physicians are doctors of medicine, we are doctors of physical therapy.
Okay, so educationally, you guys are at the highest pinnacle of this clinic. This is what you do. And then you then get certifications in different would I call it disciplines?
You can, right? So many people who graduate go into, you can go into orthopedics, you can go into acute care, you can go into geriatric care, you can go into pediatric care. And then physical therapy has different disciplines in which you can get a residency in. Just like physicians go to a residency, we can also go to a residency, although it's not required. Okay, so you can become an orthopedic specialist, you can become a sports specialist, a pediatric specialist, a geriatric specialist, a neuro specialist, different specialties that you can achieve via residencies, or there's different avenues to achieve those as well. And it elevates your practice, elevates your knowledge in that specific field. To, like you mentioned, to elevate us to the highest level within our profession.
Right. And then you have, yours is sports
I'm a sports clinical specialist.
Sports clinical specialist.
Correct.
So you're the right guy for us to talk to.
I hope so.
Now, with that, that's sports across the board. So that could be soccer, that could be baseball. Through the lens of what we do here, this is baseball. But you work specifically with athletes, whether they're adult athletes or young athletes, moving them through their process.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So our specialty is the rehab process with a focus on sports. Right. So our goal is to, especially when you work with many athletes, the goal of the athlete is to get the athlete back into competition. But no matter what injury they're dealing with, whether they're still playing at the time or not playing because of injury, our goal is to get the athlete back into competition in as good of a spot as they can be. And that takes on a different form than working with general population, somebody who maybe has a little bit more time on their hands before they're 100% again, or before they're 90-95%, and then can do their regular things. There's always a little more of a timeline going with an athlete. If you're 16 years old or if you're 25 or 30 years old, right, the time is ticking and you want to get back out there. You want to get back on the practice field because somebody else is taking your spot. And so the rehab has to be designed in a different way. Now, we have to respect the timeline of the body. The body still has to heal, so we can't just cut off 2 months of a healing process. But what we do is different. And whether you have say you have a shoulder injury, right, there's plenty of other things you can work on. While you may not be able to do everything for that shoulder, there's your legs, there's your core, right? There's the cardiovascular component that you can work on. While for somebody of the general population who doesn't consider themselves an athlete, that may be less of an importance to them. Even though I find it important to them, they may put less emphasis on it.
Sure. Yeah, and we say this a lot, and when I teach, we say this a great deal. The problem with athletes and parents and coaches face is it's a finite timeline. In high school, you get 4 years. You can't do it anymore. College, you get 5 to play for. And in pro ball, if you're not moving up in 4 years, they're moving you out. So the general population, if I break a hip, I'm on a completely different timeline. And if I have a new elbow put in, because I've got to get back into competition. And to the point that you just made, the body has its own timeline.
Yeah.
And you're trying to, as best you can as the athlete and for what you do, is try to get them back into their sports timeline as best as possible, depending on the nature of the injury.
Correct. And the difficulty, quotation marks, of course, that you face with athletes is they tend to push themselves harder, and they think that they are always that special case that, I can beat that timeline. I can do it faster than anybody else. And big part of our job is to hit the brakes there and get them to see that the body has its own timeline of healing. And while you are an athlete and your body may recover sometimes in a better way, sometimes not necessarily, that we still have to respect the time of the body. But in that time, a lot can be achieved.
Right, which kind of backs us into a point we're going to make with this one is, you mentioned recovery, so rehabilitation after an injury. In baseball, and this was very different when I was a player. When I was a player, they didn't want us in here. The coach was like, no, you go in there when you're injured. That is completely changed now, especially for the pitchers and the catchers, where the ones that throw a great deal, and throwing is, for lack of a better word, dangerous. The body's not meant to do this at that rate of speed. It's just not, correct?
Yeah, correct.
It's not designed for that. It's designed really more down here than it is up here. So it is dangerous for the elbow and the shoulder. So what we see right now is prehab instead of post, to avoid post-hab. Now, injuries are part of our game, sure. But now, especially the pitchers, there is, and I think this is great, pitchers and catchers, they are required in many programs to come in and to meet with the trainers, to meet with the physical therapists before an injury, and to get what is called a sports evaluation. And this is what, and I was just out front, and this is the thing that parents, big takeaway here. When the kid is working, when they get their physical, like their high school physical, if they're an athlete, they need to come see you too. Like if they're a pitcher, right? Yeah. You can take them through not a physical for like what the doctor does, which just means, okay, it's likely you're not going to have a seizure on the field. but you take it to a whole different level.
Yeah, correct. So, the physical that you get at your physician's office, that's part, like an EKG or so is part of that, right? You got to make sure there's no heart arrhythmias or anything going on. That's from a systemic point that you're clear. That's not necessarily what we do, but where we come in, we are the orthopedic and musculoskeletal experts. I consider ourselves, at the very top in the medical profession, an orthopedic and musculoskeletal expert. We can certainly evaluate. Doesn't matter what sport, doesn't matter what position on the baseball field you play. We can evaluate strength, range of motion, movement patterns, compensations, instability. And when we take a look at you that way, we can kind of figure out, if you are at higher or a lower risk of injury. Now, you mentioned earlier, injuries are just part of sport, right? Baseball players will get injured. Runners will get injured. Soccer players will get injured. That's inherent to play in sports. But be it working with us, working with the strength and conditioning specialist, working with somebody who understands like what you mentioned, the prehab process, the injury prevention process, statistically, it decreases your chances for injury. Right. It does not make you bulletproof to no injury. It can still happen. Right. But it just decreases your injury.
Yeah, so in that timeline, like a high school athlete, I got 4 years. I want to minimize my injury rate as much as I possibly can. So I know that I have to get bigger, faster, stronger. Well, how do I get bigger, faster, stronger? You go to somebody like you to get an evaluation of, okay, let's look at the rotator cuff, and you have modalities, and modalities are exercises, evaluation, things that you put them through to see, and we find this a lot with pitchers, where their instability is, what they need to work on. So if they're building a workout, which we'll talk about in just a minute, how to build a strength workout for a pitcher, but wait a minute, before you get on the bench press, you have a weak core, or you have some infraspinatus, some of the decelerator issues, or your forearms aren't really as developed as they need to be to protect that UCL. So coming to you, you can dial that in, or somebody like you can dial that in and say, okay, this is the evaluation, here's your imbalance, here's your weakness, here are the problems, and you can build a workout around that, addressing those problems, so we rehabilitate as we're working out. Is that safe to say?
Absolutely. That's exactly what we try to promote for athletes, because I'd much rather work with athletes in that capacity than if they are injured, right? Because that takes on a whole different form. Now, they may not be able to play their sport, right? That takes away part of their social being, because that's a lot of times what athletes associate themselves with.
Identity thing, yeah.
Identity, correct. So if you're working with people or athletes in the clinic to prevent injuries, that is preferred, and that should be a big part of every athlete's training. Right? Training is not just on the field. It's not just throwing baseballs. It's not just hitting or doing batting practice, but it's also all the stuff you do behind the scenes, the stuff that nobody really puts their eyes on, the stuff that you do when nobody's watching. That's the stuff that really is going to get you better, and then you can shine on the baseball field.
You start separating yourself from everybody else.
Correct.
Which is what you want to do. That's 100% right. When I'm working on the skill side with a guy, maybe we'll hit on a Friday, but if he's not hitting off the tee at home, working independently, well, then you're doing the minimum. You're checking a box.
Yep.
So if they're coming in here and you give them here you go, and you go over it with them and all that, and they don't go do that, well, you'll be here eventually, and we're going to be working on your rehab instead of your prehab.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's all that stuff behind the scenes. And with our sport's weird. We don't use our strength directly. We use strength to really create force and arm speed and bat speed.
Yep.
And it's more of a rotational movement than an explosive movement. So how we design workouts and what we do is very different than like if you were working with a football player.
Good.
Completely different workout. And not to take away from the trainers and the people at the gyms, and I'm sure they do a good job. But we see it when we go to the gym. It's like, oh, that's a picture, and like, oh boy, that's too much weight. Ooh, that's an injury waiting to happen, which is why we talk about these simple frameworks.
Yeah.
It is as simple as you can make it. And before we take a deep kind of dive in there are I want to kind of back up to go forward. Coming to you, to see you, to do a sports evaluation, whether you're a football player, whether it doesn't matter, again, baseball here, the cost is something that we always have to consider. In Florida, and I would assume other states as well, they can make an appointment with you without a referral from a physician for 30 calendar days.
Correct.
So if I come in on August 1 and say, I'm a pitcher, I'm a catcher, I'm whatever, I need my sports performance evaluation, and then I need you to take me through how to do it, how to build it, I've got 30 days without just working with you, and off I go, right?
Correct. So in the state of Florida, you can go to a physical therapist. It's called direct access.
Direct access.
It allows people to access directly without seeing a physician first. So this used to be back in the day where we were dependent on physicians recognizing, this athlete is injured, they need physical therapy, they need to write a script, and the script has to be brought into us before we could see them. And this has nothing to do with insurance payments or self-pay, or it doesn't matter. This has to do with our Practice Act, right, in Florida. Now, I believe that every state in the United States now has some form of direct access. It's not the same everywhere. But you're right, in Florida, you can come see a physical therapist for up to 30 calendar days without having a referral. Now, what happens is, and this is really great, when people come in the first time, we usually write up our notes, right? Because we do documentation just like any other medical professional, and we will send that document to the doctor. If the physician signs off on that, which they usually do, that's not called a plan of care. That takes place of the referral. Now, so when the athlete could potentially never actually see the doctor. And now we have a plan of care in place, and then we're good to go. And once we have it, we're okay with that one. We don't need another one. Now that is if we do physical therapy services, right? Physical therapy in terms of if somebody's coming in with an injury. What we also do is we also do a strength and conditioning, right? Where we do a performance training. In that, we don't technically do physical therapy services. So for that, we do not need any sort of referral because we do not bill any physical therapy codes for that one.
Right. So if they're hurt, they go to the doctor, then they come to you. If they're not hurt, they go to you and they do a sports performance, but this is the prehab versus the post-hab.
Even if they're hurt, they come directly to us.
Okay.
So even with an injury, an athlete can come directly to us, and we will do a full orthopedic and musculoskeletal evaluation on them. And if we find it necessary that they do have to go see an orthopedic surgeon or an orthopedic physician, whether it's surgical or not surgical, then we will refer. But we can start treatment right away with them. So an injured athlete does not have to see a physician before they see us.
Okay, so if a parent is noticing he's complaining that it hurts.
Yeah.
It shouldn't hurt this much.
Yeah.
And it's kind of one of those things where it's not completely debilitative, where they maybe don't want, like Coco Eaton's a huge ortho guy, works with the Rays, and there's many guys that work with the Rays, but it's hard to get in to see him sometimes. So if it's like, maybe I need to see somebody, you can do that.
Absolutely.
They can come into you and you can say, okay, your arm hurts when I throw and I do this, my arm hurts. And you can start that workup. Is that a correct word?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. You start that workup and say, ooh, there looks to be some UCL issues. You're going to need an MRI, a physician.
Correct.
Then you can go that route, or say, yeah, look, it's a mechanical issue. Your front side's flying out, or you get instability. That's the big one with pitchers, that instability back here. And I imagine you can spot that pretty quickly.
Yeah, we certainly can. If we find that let's go back to the UCL example that you gave, and we think there's some instability at that elbow. That may not just be a strain, like I'm expecting something worse. As a doctor of physical therapy in Florida, we still cannot refer them for an MRI or an X-ray. Now, there's other states in the United States where they can, and hopefully that will come along. But in Florida, we cannot yet.
But you would refer them back to
then I would refer them to a physician. Yeah, we have great relationships with physicians, and Dr. Coco Eden is one of them that we would refer to, and they would then do their evaluation and likely recommend an MRI on that. In that case, we would probably hold off on some treatment until we get more of the results. But if this is a case now where we find out it's probably okay, it may just be strained a little bit, I don't think that we necessarily need an MRI, we can start treatment on that right away. With manual therapy, whether that's massage, modalities, strength training, and then now we're like getting into the rehabilitation phase, like reducing the inflammation, reducing the pain, and then once that is reduced and the inflammation has been reduced, now we can start building up that strength again. We can maintain the range of motion in the elbow, in the shoulder, in the wrist. We can start building up strength again in the core, in the shoulder, in the elbow, in the wrist. And then we see where it goes from there. Now, we work closely with physicians, so very often, let's say this is a young athlete, a parent may want them to go see a physician. Absolutely, go see a physician as well. We work in coordination. It's not us versus them. Let's all work together and figure out this problem together. So we work very closely with physicians, but an athlete does not need to see a physician to come see us.
To come see you guys. So let's say they're starting the season, starting the fall season. They come see you. They're going to do a workup, a sports performance workup. And it's always, what's the cost kind of thing. And it's for this clinic, it's anywhere, it kind of depends on what you're doing, obviously, but anywhere from $100 to $200 without insurance, right?
So our rates are just over $100. Right. It's actually $110.
So it's basically $100 to come see you to get a sports performance. If I'm just coming in and said, look, I'm a junior, give me the sports pitcher's eval.
Yeah.
$110. No insurance, $110.
Yes. And that is something that we need to do because insurance may not cover something like that.
Right.
And as a business owner as well, I cannot take that risk of insurance denying these claims. So therefore, we do that without insurance. Now, if there's an injury involved, that's a different story.
Right.
If we accept your insurance, now we can go through insurance. If we don't accept the insurance, then we go to self-pay route. Self-pay route has many advantages to both the athlete and myself as a clinician, because there's a little bit of a higher cost to the athlete, but now we're also not bound by the insurance company kind of dictating the treatment, right? Or telling us you can only do this X amount of times, or you can only do this and this, because of how reimbursement works in the medical world.
Right.
And that has nothing to do with the athlete or the injury. That is just insurance and reimbursements.
Right. And that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother show. But to come in and to get that sports performance evaluation, there's going to be some information to recover, and you usually always uncover something in a young athlete. Is it safe to say stability is probably the number one?
Stability is very often one. Strength and then power development, and it depends on what age that we're talking about as well, because very often we work with young athletes as well who have been playing, let's say, baseball, right? They started Little League baseball when they were 8, 9, maybe even younger, right? And let's say they're 15 now and they're playing baseball, and maybe they did some other sports, maybe not. And there's lots of research out there, of course, that says that at a young age, athletes below the age of 14, 15, the more variety of sports you can play, the better athletic development that your body has because of different movement patterns and stuff, and you will develop into a better baseball player actually over time. But very often what we see too is in these young athletes is they've never done any resistance training, right? So that's when we see that, then it's not so much an issue of an instability or power. Then we just have to get this athlete used to working with resistance, right? And it's more, and we start out with body weight exercises. We start out making sure they have good and correct movement patterns. For example, a squat, right? A hip hinge that will lead into a deadlift over time. That they have good control over their shoulder with internal external rotations when they're doing rows. They're not shrugging their shoulders up towards the ears, but they can pull their shoulders back. Right, that they have great control over their shoulder blades, because your shoulder blade is so important in control of your mid-back, your neck, your shoulder, and how it transfers forces from the core onto the arm. So we need to make sure that that shoulder blade is functioning very, very well, and that the athlete has great control over that before we just start adding on a bunch of weights. And that leads me into the other problem that we sometimes see. We sometimes see young athletes who have been doing resistance training, but don't have good motor control, don't have the coordination, because they didn't lay down a solid foundation. And I think that is where we as sports physical therapists, performance physical therapists, can really make a big difference in laying down a solid foundation for their strength and conditioning that they can then develop over the next several years.
Because it takes time.
It takes time. The body doesn't just learn that, from if you start on a Monday, it's not like by next Sunday, all of a sudden you have this under control. No, depending on the age and depending on how long you've been doing it and depending on how skilled you are and how much attention you pay to it, it can take, 2-3 months before the body starts developing these movement patterns, this coordination pattern. And that's okay that it takes that time, but you're working towards something. It doesn't have to be here today. You're laying down a foundation, and the more solid that foundation is, and that takes time, it's going to lead to better strength development over time.
Yeah, 100%. And working with athletes for 30 years and working with guys like you for as long as I've worked with them too, they talk about stability. So the stability is kind of like the concrete for the building kind of thing. You mentioned the shoulder blades. For us, that's a direct point of access to success. And I will grab guys off the bench press. No, come over here. And we call it squeeze and drop. You squeeze them together and you put them in your body, drop them down.
Yep.
So you create that foundation. Instead, you'll see them start going like this. And then it starts to flare. You see that elbow start to flare. It's like, nope. Same way in the squats. I'm not a big squat guy. I don't like weight on the back. And for us, it doesn't translate that well to baseball because we're so rotational. I don't also like deadlift because of risk and reward. But when you see them in there, and the first thing they're doing, their scaps raised, and then their butt peaks, the first thing that goes up, oh, God, no, stop. We're going to back up. We're going to cut that weight down in half. And we're going to work on moving in the way that it benefits the body most.
Yep.
Reasonable to say?
Absolutely.
And you do that. If they come in, going back to the example, they come in, they get a sports eval, they pay $110 for that. It's nothing. Then you can say, look, here's what you need to do. Come back in. This is the program I'm going to write for you as a pitcher, as a catcher, as an infielder. This is the program I'm going to write for you, but I need you to come back in so I can show you how to do this. So A, you don't hurt yourself. And B, you shrink that timeline as much as your body will allow.
Correct. Right? That's again where the value is in working with a strength and conditioning specialist, where the value is in working with a doctor of physical therapy, a sports therapist.
This is all you. This is all under your.
This is a minute. This is what we do right here. Right. Because I may do an evaluation on somebody, and we say, okay, this is where you have your greatest deficit. So let's start targeting this deficit. And I send them home with, if I give them too many exercises to do at home, one, how effective are they really going to do them? And will they do them properly? Because you may think that you're doing something right. However, if you actually start watching yourself now, you're not doing it right at all. And over time, myself, you, athletes, everybody, our bodies are amazing machines, but we create compensations and we do stuff in a way that may not be the best way. Right? Our bodies will get us from point A to point B, but how do we get there is not always the most efficient way. And where we come in too is helping you improve that efficiency. So I may tell you to go do something at home, or if I tell you to go do something at home and you do this but you're doing it incorrect, you can do this 100 times. Right? It's going to make no difference. Right? But you may not have the awareness of what your body's actually doing. You may not have the ability to, at home, have an extra set of trained eyes on you. So until you master that, there's a lot of benefit in working with us. And once you master it, it's not that you don't have to think about it anymore, but the process becomes a lot easier. The connection from your central nervous system, your brain, to those specific muscles that need to fire, to the joints that need to move in a certain way, to the coordination between the joints and the muscles and how they move, that connection becomes better over time. And that's what we call neuromuscular re-education. And those neural pathways are so important in developing. And when you look at athletes at the highest level, that is what they do behind the scenes all the time. They're working on these small stabilizing muscles on movement patterns to improve their efficiency. Because you could be a top athlete and you stop working on something, your body over time will start compensating and those movement patterns will go away.
Right, 100%. It's amazing. Especially the younger kids, and I say younger, I work primarily with high school and above, when they first start in this, And I was that guy, dude. I was that guy too. Oh, we get bands. We're gonna have rubber bands. What? I want to get on the weights, man. Come on, I want to get on the damn. I want to move stuff. You know, these silly looking little tedious 30 internal rotation and all this. They hate it.
Yeah.
Except for the ones that perform at the highest level. They love it.
Yeah.
Because over time, like you said, they've mastered this, taking those inefficiencies, deficiencies, instabilities, and they shrink that gap to where performance is just elevated. The bottom raises.
Absolutely.
The height is the height. That's what's good. But you're raising that bottom higher and higher and higher of sports performance. So they get you for, well, a week, 3 extra visits, 4 extra visits, something like that, where you're taking them through what they need to do. Was that reasonable? Sometimes it'd be more, obviously, if there's...
Ideally, people work with us for several weeks because, again, the body doesn't learn this stuff in a week.
Yeah.
Now, when you first start out and you come from doing very little, the gains you'll see very early on are great.
Yeah, big leagues are...
You make much bigger gains early on. And as you get better, you have to put in more and more work to make smaller gains. And that's for anything in life, right? There's so many examples we can give in life where that's the case. And our job is to keep people on track. And I think in today's day and age with social media as well, it creates an extra challenge because there's so much stuff out there on social media, and there's all this stuff, and do it this way, do it that way, and try to make it fancy and try to make these exercises sexy and everything. Sometimes the basic stuff is what works the best. The stuff that was done 15 years ago sometimes still works the best right now. I'm not saying that you have to do the little things all the time and repeat the same things over and over and over again. But our job too is to keep the athlete on top of what's important and not just thinking, "Ooh, I saw this on social media, I should be doing this." No, do the things that are important, and once you feel better, I'm sure you can add in some of these things as well. It makes it fun. Working out should be fun. Yeah, we can't just make this boring and over time because then the athlete will lose interest, and that's not the point of it. The point is to keep engaged, to stay engaged with it, be interested in it, so that you can continue making those gains. But the basic stuff is what works really well.
Yeah, exactly. And that brings us kind of to our next point. There are, and what our job here is to give them, one, what they need, but to make it easier. Athletes only have one job. Make success easier. Whether you're a soccer player or you're a baseball player or whatever. You lift weights because the application of strength should make it easier to hit.
Sure.
You do stabilization because it should make it easier to pitch. You practice your skill work because it makes it easier to score goals.
Sure.
So all of this is the intent to make it easier. But when you look on the internet, it's like, holy crap, man. It's complicated. How do I choose what in the heck to do?
Correct.
So, and we talked about this a little bit in our production meeting. How do they choose on the internet? And I'm kind of setting you up. I'm going to take it away from you. This guy says you need to do this. And then that guy on the internet says, oh, don't do that. You need to do this. And then there's these bands, and there's these balls, and there's this bow thing, and whatever. The advice is, well, don't do any of it.
Yeah.
Choose none of that. If you're going to spend $100 on weighted balls, or now they've got one where it's not a sandbag, it's a water bag, where they're throwing a water bag around. Don't spend any money on that. Spend the money you were going to spend on that to come get a sports performance evaluation from somebody like you to say, okay, this is what you need for your sport.
Correct.
And then what that'll do is that'll shrink all of that stuff, like what should I do, into a little bucket of, okay, I need to choose from these 4 or 5 different things, not from 400,000 or 500,000, right?
Correct. And like I mentioned earlier, build a solid foundation, and once the foundation is built, now you can add in the water bag if you really like. Now you can add in this, but without that solid foundation, if you start using some of these fancy tools, you
You might make it worse.
You may make it worse, or you're just not going to get the results that you're trying to do, and you're spending more money on gadgets, this and that, and you're not going to get the results that you see. Now, these things can be very effective, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't use those things at all, but there's a right time and place to use those things, and sometimes or very often it starts with us coming in here, getting a good examination done, figure out where are your weakest points. Let's elevate those first, so your whole baseline, like you mentioned earlier, your whole baseline gets elevated, and now let's work from there.
Right. And then you can, in concert with you, hey, Dr. Jan, I'm looking at these theraballs to use. And then you have an educated conversation with somebody that knows what they're doing. And the people on the internet, and many of them are good, sure, great, whatever. But it may work, it may not. It depends on what you're trying to do and your baseline of where you are as an athlete. So, and it's working with me on the skill side. I've got information on the skill side to develop. Working with you on the physical development side, include us. It's all one big team.
Absolutely, and the example goes across other sports. Like, let's say, for example, running. Right? Yeah. You may want to say, hey, my goal is for next year to run a marathon. You go online and you download a generic marathon training plan. That's not necessary. I'm not saying that you can't get to the marathon point, but that may not be the best plan for you, right? Because there's a difference between, let's say you run a 10-minute mile and somebody who runs a 7-minute mile. These training plans don't translate the same, right? If it tells you to go run 10 miles, the person running at a 7 minute per mile is going to get done much faster than the person running at 10 minutes per mile. So the time on your feet is much longer, and the overall stress starts accumulating and building up. And it's the same with some of these shoulder programs or arm care programs or baseball specific programs. While they're not bad programs, it may not be the right program for you because of your unique abilities or where your unique deficits lie. And then I'm talking about your strength, your power production, right? Or your internal, external rotation strength, your ratio, your core strength, your movement patterns, your overall motor control of the core, the hips, the arm.
Right, how it all functions together as a unit. Yeah. Correct. Right. Yeah. So, with that said, looking at, and we're not ranting on this program, but we got to tell the truth on here. When folks are looking at these programs, they've come see you and they're all squared away and stuff, and they're looking at it, make some additions. There's some things that the parents need to look for and kind of sniff out a little bit. One of them is that I find is when they're talking about research and they're talking about information. Well, where does that come from? You run across and I don't want to pick on anybody, but they've got either the Theraballs or the whatever that the particular thing they're trying to sell you is, and they'll talk about data. The data shows what data. From who? Yeah. Is it data that they collected? Well, if it's data that they collected, would you say that's reliable?
Probably not, right?
Probably not, right? Probably not particularly reliable. So if there are some things to sniff out, when you're looking at these myriad of programs, if they're talking about data and statistics, how was it collected? And maybe they tell you, maybe they don't. Most of the time, I would say it's probably internally collected. May not be particularly reliable. Athlete endorsement. Athlete endorsement's great, right? It's out there, but I'm not Ken Griffey Jr. Yeah. So I don't know if athlete endorsement's particularly valid, right?
Well, that's why they do it, right? To get people to buy this stuff because they put a famous athlete's face on there. It's a sales tactic. Like it works. Does that make the product better? Not necessarily. Right. That doesn't necessarily mean that athlete is using that product all the time. That's that company's sales tactic, just like there's many different advertising tactics out there.
Right. You gotta be careful about that stuff.
Yeah, so when it comes to the research and the data on these products, I would suggest find somebody local, who knows what they're talking about and who has used certain products and see if they use it and what their experience with it is, rather than just going out and buying these things.
Right, which leads me to the third one, because they can kind of camouflage. And again, not that they're nefarious or anything like that, but they're trying to sell something.
Sure.
So they'll talk data, they'll pay an athlete to endorse it. The athlete may or may not have used it. And then the reviews.
Yeah.
That's the one that I like. And I don't look at the 5-star reviews. I go to the bottom. I look at the ones and the 2s.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm looking for a problem, it's that I'm looking for what they say and how they say it. So if a product out there has 5 reviews, gosh, you're not giving me much to go on. I don't know. If it's got 500 reviews, I'm looking at those 1- and 2-star reviews and seeing,
Yeah.
and then to be perfectly honest, I would say then if you make a decision on it, you gotta test it and see.
Yeah.
See if it works.
Sure.
That's a danger point for these folks, right? They're like, oh crap, I don't know. And usually what they'll do is they'll throw money at it.
Yeah.
They'll buy the weighted balls and the bands and the thing and the thing and the thing. They'll overdo it, right?
Yeah.
And kind of go from there, and they overload.
Yeah. And I think myself included, and I think we've all done that, right? I've bought stuff too. I've been, convinced by commercials or social media ads to buy something because it looked great in their advertising video. And did it really pay off? Sometimes I've gotten lucky with some products I like, but probably there's more products that I've bought over time that I don't use anymore, right? Because it was more of it looked good in the video, and they had a great cameraman filming this and a great marketing team, but was it really effective? No, it wasn't. And over time, you hope you learn, myself included, to be a little bit less convinced by some of these products. And while the idea behind it may sound great, it's not necessarily as effective, or it's been done before just in a different way, and you can do the same thing in a more effective way, how it's been done for years already. Right.
Yeah, sometimes they'll reinvent the wheel, of course, in a different color. Well, that's the same stuff I was doing in 1980.
Exactly.
It's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
So a big takeaway is when you're seeing these products and seeing these services on the internet, the data, how reliable is it? If it's internally driven, are they citing actual sites? Where did it come from? A good little filter for parents, coaches. Then athlete endorsement. If you would buy it without the athlete, or buy which ones, if there was no athlete endorsing it, would you still buy it?
Yeah, of course.
The reviews, talking to somebody that's used it, and to be perfectly honest, I think you talk with somebody like you, because you're not very expensive. You're not very expensive, and this is kind of what you do. But eventually, they're going to have to try it and test it. All right, so the key takeaway here on sniff out the BS. If the athlete didn't endorse it, would you buy it? Put on some filters, talk to your PT, and eventually you're going to have to kind of test it. And you're going to have to test that thing. But those little things, those weighted balls and all that kind of stuff, that is a very small part.
Correct.
That's not the magic. There is no magic pill.
There's not, unfortunately.
And it doesn't matter what sport, right? There's no magic pill. Academically, you got to put the work in and study. There's no magic pill for any of it. You got to put the work in. That's the magic pill. That's actually the secret sauce, is the sweat and the blood, the blisters. So these things on the internet are not the end-all, be-all. It's a small component of a larger framework, which for us, we deal in these frameworks, they're pretty simple. They're not difficult. But for the average person, what are you talking about? So the frameworks, and we're dealing with your framework. We'll deal with my skill development framework a little bit later. It is a generic, easy to use, any sport, doesn't matter. You just kind of plug things in, plug and play. And the athletes and the parents get in this little bit of a loop of they don't want to make a mistake. You know what I mean? I don't want to make a mistake because they're on a timeline. So sometimes they're afraid to like, well, they kind of lock up.
Yeah.
Should I do bench press? Should I not do bench press?
Yeah.
Should I do incline? Should I not do incline? So they get kind of, they get frozen in this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the framework here. Basically what you do, in what you do, there's stability. That's part of the framework, right?
Yeah.
All athletes. Doesn't matter.
Nope.
And that's going to be the core. That's the core is from the shoulders to the hips. But it also includes the shoulders, the shoulder complex itself. And for me, for athletes, and I know we talked about this production meeting, the bottom as well. I call it the I. It's the T. You see it all the internet. It's the T. It's the shoulders and the core. But I include the hips. So it's the capital I.
Because without in the core.
Without those, it's kind of useless, right? Then you've got strength, the strength component. Okay, that's building more muscle mass to implement for your sport. There's speed training. Now, speed doesn't necessarily mean foot speed.
No.
It's more explosive training. So taking the strength you're building and creating power.
Yep.
So combining speed. Maybe in baseball that might be mid balls.
Absolutely.
Who knows? Because arm speed's a big deal. And then recovery.
Yep.
That is now the component for us, especially for pitchers and catchers. If they're not recovering, if they're not removing those toxins, that exhaust left over from exercise, they're not advancing as far as they need to from day to day.
Correct.
Right? That makes sense?
Absolutely.
And all they do is they take, and it doesn't matter who it is, this is the framework that athletes work in.
Yeah. Yeah.
They build strength. They build stability.
Yeah.
They build speed, explosiveness. They work with their skill.
Yeah.
And then they recover.
That's it.
That's literally it.
That's it. The difficulty is how do you implement it, but that is the framework. That's all there is to it. Yeah.
Right. It's not very complicated.
No.
So when you're looking at stuff and you're talking to people, where's the fit in this framework?
Yeah.
Because if you're a track athlete, you're doing this with your coach and with your trainer. If you're a high jumper, if you're a pole vaulter,
yeah.
if you're all doing the same thing.
Absolutely.
So where does it fall into this? Is it strength training? Is it stability training? Like if they're looking at bands, right? The band workouts, where would that fall in here? That would fall in stability.
Yeah.
Right?
It could be stability. It could be strength, depending on how you look at it. And I think we do have to clear up when we're talking about strength or we're talking about power development, but maybe mostly about strength. We're not just talking about lifting as heavy as possible, right? The point of progressing with this framework and becoming a better athlete is not, we're not becoming bodybuilders. We're not lifting more and more weight. No, it's like how efficient can we lift this weight? And when we lift weights in a certain way over a period of time, we become more effective at it. And very often it could be some exercise take some lighter resistance, some exercise take more resistance, but it's not about just do more and more and more and more weight. That's not what we're talking about.
Right. No, it's sport specific.
Sport specific.
And even it's position specific than sports as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because the football players, and we talked about this earlier, and this will be a recurring theme that threads all of these discussions. It has to be specific for what you want to accomplish.
Correct.
In baseball, we don't use our strength directly against our opponent.
Yeah.
We use it indirectly. In football, you do.
Yeah.
So if you're working with a football athlete, squat. Okay.
Yeah.
This is the way but if you're working with a pitcher, it's different.
Yeah.
You don't do that. It's not that you don't do the same. It's that the weight, you don't need to squat 500 pounds to pitch.
You do not. The pitcher should still squat, but they don't have to be doing a 1 rep max, right? They can be working with less aggressive resistance. But you have to squat because that's such an important exercise and there's so much development that happens there. But yes, you don't have to squat as much as as a lineman or even a running back in football.
And they get lost in this. They do get lost in this. And the high schools do the best job that they possibly can.
Sure.
But they end up, pitchers are working with and it's an ego thing.
Yeah.
It's an ego thing. And some guys are good at it, but a 400-pound bench press does not equal a 400-foot home run.
No, it does not.
It's how you apply it. Runners the same way.
Yeah.
So let's do this. Let's go into this framework just a little bit. Stability. Let's start with that. It doesn't matter the sport. You
That's
must
necessary.
You must be stable.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the focus of stability for what we're talking about primarily is the hips, the core, the shoulders. Just start talking about what's something that they need to know something about this. Is it something they do every day? Is it something that's a good warm-up? How do they implement stability?
I think stability should be part, it doesn't have to be every single day, but it should be trained multiple times a week. Right? Let's say we need to train that 3-4 times a week. And when we talk about stability, you can think of it as you got to be able to stand on one leg and do something with your arm out away from your body, right? That's the most basic form of creating stability over there. If you think about pitchers, once they're winding up, they're pitching, they're standing on one leg. Right. They create so much force in their body before they release the ball. That is all. Of course, there's power involved there, but there's so much stability. So how strong are you, and what can you do when you stand on one leg? Right? When you place an unstable surface underneath your leg, what can you do now? How wobbly does the athlete become? That's talking about stability. It's about the coordination of all those muscles that you said, right, that sit around the spine, that sit in what we traditionally think of as the core, and how well are the hips coordinating with all those muscles around the spine? How well are the shoulders coordinating with those muscles? The shoulders, they connect to our hips via a sling. It's a diagonal pattern. How well does your right shoulder coordinate with your left hip? With your left hip, exactly. Very, very important. And when we don't have that good coordination there, and then we see that, right, we can't really work on power because you're not stable. You have to have a stable core before you can start generating power. That doesn't mean that you can't generate power without an unstable core, but you're probably not reaching your maximum potential. And again, here we are back to like injury prevention. You're putting stress on the body, and you're stressing areas of the body that may not be as accustomed to absorbing that stress, or may not be as great at that stress loading, and therefore, gradually over time, may become overstressed. And that's where
that can start lead. That's a little bit of a predisposition to injury.
Absolutely, and a simple example is a rotary cuff strain. Like in somebody, in a baseball player who throws a lot, right? A pitcher, even infielders who throw a lot. That rotator cuff starts hurting them a bit, and it could very well be that they have not a stronger core as necessary. So sure, they can throw hard, and maybe that throw could be accurate, but there is a little bit more strain on that shoulder, on their arm, than there should be if they had a stronger core. If you can create a more stable core there and better force production or force transfer onto the shoulder, that rotator cuff may not get strained as much with every throw. And we're talking a few percentages here, but a few percentages over a period of time really starts adding up, and we can remove that. Now the shoulder starts feeling better again. Right. That's where that stability really comes in.
Right. And for the athlete, you feel stale, you feel a little lethargic, it kind of hurts. You know, it's that low E kind of pain or whatever, and you want to feel ballistic, so you can just cut it loose. You shouldn't really hurt. Now, your arm's going to be sore, and you're going to get sore, throw over time. Sure. That's just kind of the nature of it. But it shouldn't you shouldn't show up to the yard every day and it just hurt.
Correct.
And localize pain.
Yeah, that should not be happening.
That's what they call you.
That's when something's going on.
That's when something's wrong.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, call me. So the hip, the core, that's the stability part. That's the focus of stability. The purpose, like you said, is to have it all in concert, all working together.
Right.
So it's not just from the belly button to the neck, it's how the hips and the belly button and the neck and everything all work together. That's the purpose, because what we're trying to do as pitchers, as throwers, is we're kinetically moving force, building force, like you talk about, kind of loading that up, and we're really just trying to focus it on about a 3-inch area of release.
Sure.
That's called the kinetic linking process, which many people get the kinetic linking process wrong. They think it comes from the feet. Sort of. It really comes from the center.
Yeah, it comes from the center, and again, to clear up, core is not what we see when we go to the gym. You know, people doing sit-ups and stuff. That's not core. Core is much more than your abdominals, your six-pack muscles, right? And there's so much more. It glutes. Your glutes. Oh, that's the glutes are part of the hips. Right? So when I mentioned hips, Glutes are an important part of that. Your pelvic floor, really, really important part. We don't think of our pelvic floor muscles, but there's so many muscles inside our pelvis, right, that help with the stability. They connect to the hips. They connect to your spine, to what we call the pelvic floor. And on top of the pelvic floor, we have a bunch of our internal organs that sit on there, right? Our diaphragm. How are we breathing? How's the diaphragm connected to that? Can we do proper diaphragmatic breathing when necessary, of course, when it's appropriate, because you generate force from there, right? You create a very strong, stable spine when you have good control over that. And how does that transfer then onto the shoulder blades, right? Shoulder blades, we talked about it earlier, but a shoulder blade that's not in a stable position, a shoulder blade where there's excessive movement or we don't have good control of those shoulder blades, well, you can't expect your rotator cuff to perform efficiently because your rotator cuff sits directly attached on top of that shoulder blade, right? So that shoulder blade is not sitting in an ideal position, or there's excessive movement, or there's a lack of movement there. We cannot expect our rotator cuff to perform well. Well, the rotator cuff is not performing well, and it's getting overstressed. We're going to put more stress further away from the body. Now we're talking about the elbow and the wrist, right? And again, you may have an elbow injury and you think like, okay, it's my elbow. Sure, pain is at the elbow, but is the true problem at the elbow, or is the true problem really sitting at your core or at your shoulder, right? Or does it really start at the hips? It's probably a combination of all. It's never just one thing. It's always a combination of it all. But that's where you need to have a trained clinician to kind of evaluate all that, to figure out where are your weakest links and where do you need to start, right? And sometimes the treatment of an elbow is, yes, there's a lot of core work involved with that.
Right, and that's before you get hurt.
Ideally
before you get hurt.
If you get hurt, then there's going to be probably a lot of core work afterwards because we have some ground to make up. Yeah, and maybe that elbow is too inflamed. We can't do a whole lot with it. Right. Just doing strengthening for the elbow is not necessarily beneficial because we got to let some of that inflammation calm down. We have to sometimes you have to remove what's causing the irritation. Well, that gives us an opportunity now to catch up on the core, right? Catch up on the legs, catch up on the glutes, catch up on the pelvic floor, on your shoulder, on the muscles that attach around the shoulder blades. That could be a great opportunity, a great time to work on that.
Absolutely. Emphasis. You just talked about it. So in the stability part, the emphasis is creating concert with everything. So the entire body moves in the way it's designed to move the most efficiently, the most effectively. That's really the emphasis, what you're talking about. Now, the core work, we also put in here where the environment that you're working in. So the environment is certainly important because core work typically is more done in volume, right? So if, let's say, I'm doing some kind of a core exercise, I want to be take me through just a general core exercise in something where the environment is going to be super predictable. We're working in a little bit higher volume.
So, for example, a dead bug exercise.
Dead bug. Okay, where you're laying on your back.
Laying on your back, you have your legs in the air, your arms are in the air. The whole idea is to prevent your spine from extending, so your spine from coming away from the table as you move opposite leg and arm. Right? So you're moving your arm in deflection, you're moving your leg, your hip really into extension. And by that, you're stressing your core. You're working opposite leg and arm, and you can vary this exercise. You can add resistance. You can do it in a variety of ways. But the whole idea is to create a good force transfer, a good connection between the hip and the shoulder, and of course everything that sits in bilateral, of course.
From this side to that side, because we're humans. That's the way.
That's how we work. And then like you said, you may want to do a little more volume, right? 3 sets of 10 is not enough over there. And you can think of your core muscles for in everyday life. Your core muscles have to work efficiently at 7 a.m., but they also have to work just as efficiently at 7 p.m. Right? It's not like some other muscles that you can turn on and off, and you use sporadically throughout the day, and you use it for specific function. No, your core muscles are working all day long, right? And that is not just in sport. That's just when you're walking around, when you're getting up out of your bed, when you go to the grocery store and you're reaching for something. And athletes go to the grocery store. They get in and out of their car. They carry stuff as well on a daily basis. that is your core as well, right? So it has to work efficiently in the morning, but also in the evening. And of course, as an athlete, now you put extra demands on this as well while you're, whether it's a practice or in a game situation. So you have to be trained so much more. Your core cannot show signs of fatigue, and that's something part of stability as well, is that fatigue resistance. And especially in baseball, it's about producing force, power in a very, very short amount of time. Right now, we're throwing the ball or we're hitting. It's a very short burst of power. But to be efficient at that, you also have to build up your aerobic system, and you have to have reduce fatigue over time, right? If you're developing more fatigue, let's say a pitcher and you're getting to the seventh inning, let's say, and the body starts getting tired because your aerobic system is not efficiently working anymore, well, now you can't expect to produce force as efficiently. And now you're putting yourself statistically at a higher risk for injury. That's not saying injury will happen right that moment, but over time, you're putting yourself. And that, again, that goes into that core stability as well. How efficiently are you working in the morning and in the evening, or at any other given time throughout the day? And how efficiently is your body working? And that needs to be trained. And you do that in higher volume, less resistance, higher volume, and really focusing on your form.
Right, yeah, because you don't feel it. You don't feel your core. It's like, oh, my core hurts today.
No.
Never has anyone said.
No.
But if you're working through this, it will pay benefits unwittingly.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And if you're not working on it, like I said, my elbow could be hurting, but that's just where the hurt is.
Yeah.
It may be because I'm unstable.
Yeah. And very often these are exercises, and as you get higher up, right, from high school to college to, let's say, the professionals, these are the exercises that the trainer is not telling you to do anymore. These are exercises that have just become so ingrained with you, and you just know to do it, and you just do it because you know it's beneficial, even though it's not about breaking a sweat in that moment. It's not about burning calories or so, right? It's just, this builds your foundation, and these things are necessary, and you just learn it over time.
Right.
You just have to do these things if you want to achieve great things.
Well, this is what you do. This is just what you do. And you can't check the box. You can't just check the box. And we tell athletes this a lot, like taking ground balls or taking fly balls or batting practice, going through the motions. Okay, look, you're going to be here doing core work for 90 seconds. Make it the best 90 seconds you can.
Yeah.
We will tell guys, and I learned this from a trainer years ago, like on external rotation. And then this is big. Everybody knows external rotation. He goes, don't pull. Think about your shoulder and rotate.
Yeah.
So I would look at my shoulder and think rotate. Well, because my arm would stop pulling. And now that's not core anymore. Now that's something completely different. It's out of focus for what we're trying to accomplish. So I'm rotating.
Yeah.
This is how
That's why we put a small towel underneath your arm.
Right.
To do that. So you can't drop the towel. And very simple with that example too is you have to watch the wrist. Like very often in here we'll see people, and this is where that coordination comes into play. You think you're externally rotating your arm, but really at some point you start extending the wrist. Right. My wrist ends up in the same position as if I were to rotate further. So to my body, it's like, okay, I'm over here. I did enough. But how did you get there? You didn't get there in an efficient way. You didn't get there in the way I wanted you to get there. Yeah, it takes back to what we mentioned earlier. Eyes on the person, right? And teaching that and creating that awareness. And that goes into core work as well, right? That's really important, is that mind-body connection.
Oh, yeah. Because you don't just get the exercise done.
No.
You're not just looking to get through 30 repetitions.
No.
And that goes to strength, that goes to all of it. It doesn't matter.
Yes.
You're working on something really a little deeper than that, really more specific to that.
Correct.
As to why you're doing it. So yeah, don't check the box.
Yeah.
And when you buy these things on the internet and think you'll read the damn directions.
Yeah.
But also, there's probably some information that they, should talk to you about. Yeah. Obviously, to make sure that you're getting the most benefit out of it, maintaining focus and working through it. They get to a point where they're going to have to kind of, do these things work or do they not work?
Yep.
So there's always an evaluation process. And it's the same process that we use. There's subjective, objective, and then there's the player analysis, or the player opinion we call a survey. Objective is you're looking at it as a professional, even as a parent, going, okay, we ordered these bands, we ordered these weighted balls, we ordered these things, and you're looking at it and you're going, that don't look right.
Yeah.
as a coach, you're going, yeah, that's inefficient. You know, you're looking at it with certainly a different eye, but a parent can look at it too, go, man, that doesn't look like, you know. So there's the way it looks.
Sure.
Right? Then there's the actual metric. If you can't count it, for me, it doesn't count.
Yeah.
You know, you'll come in and put them through a little battery of tests where, okay, they get to a certain point, a certain range, and then over a month, they're getting beyond that, that kind of thing. Yeah. And it's important when they're choosing these and plugging them into this framework is to say, okay, well, what's the expected gain over 30 days? If I buy this and I do it 3 days a week, like they say, I'm looking at it going, okay, that looks right. And then what should I feel at the end? How much, you know, am I going to throw it 50 miles an hour faster or whatever? There needs to be some data collected. Sure. And then finally, you got to ask the athlete because, and this is the thing that's the hardest for me to get through to the high school kids. I have to have dialogue with you. I need to know what it feels like. You need to be able to describe it to me. And this is very frustrating because at college, you can't see yourself swing. You can't really see yourself pitch, but you can feel it. Sure. So connecting to the feeling of, I'm cruising today, or something's wrong. Yeah. You need to be able to talk, and you have to do that too, right?
Absolutely. It's that internal feedback that you get, and that's where mind-body connection is so important. Like, you ask any top athlete, and they'll probably know within 10 minutes of practice how they're going to be that day. Right? They know, like, I'm feeling it today, or like, or I'm not feeling it today. And why are you not feeling it today? There could be a whole lot of reasons, right? Maybe they didn't sleep well last night. Maybe the load has been a lot lately. Maybe their heart rate variability is down a little bit because they're getting sick in like 3 days and it's slowly starting to develop, right? Maybe they're just fatigued. Maybe they have something else going on. We often forget that these athletes are people as well. They have families. They have social lives as well. They have things around them.
Academic requirements.
Sure, that affect you and I on a daily basis as well. But we don't think of that often with these athletes, and we just think, oh, they're just on the practice field. They get to play sport. What a great life. But they have so many different stressors in their life, just like you and I, and that can affect their performance as well. But as a sports fan and looking at it from the outside, we just expect these men and women to perform at the highest level all the time. And then they have a not so good day. What's going on with you? And then we start like questioning them. But that internal feedback that you get, that's something that needs to be developed over time, right? And you want to start thinking about that already in your teenage years. You want to develop, just like you want to develop muscle, you need to develop those neural pathways to create that internal feedback. And that is not easy. That's a difficult mental game to play, right? And you have to be very critical to about yourself, and you have to really become in tune with you. And with 1,000 distractions around us all the time, every day long, it's really hard to develop that internal feedback. And that's where you as a coach really come into play as well, right? Where your dialogue with the player and good communication, and talk to me about how you felt today, and talk to me what went well and what didn't go well, and how can we change that. And over time, you develop these relationships, and you start to feel it better. But no matter at what level you are, that takes time to develop, just like all these other things that we talked about.
Right. And they don't know what they don't know. It's a simple tautology. And that's where they get locked up, like we talked about at the beginning. I don't know what to do. I have no idea. Okay, just talk. Just start talking. Yeah. So we have dialogue with them. You have dialogue with them. And that dialogue helps us, no, something's wrong. They're not, they have pain here, or, where maybe it's a skill trying to hit. Does it like swing the bat, for example? Okay, what's going? I try to not give instruction immediately. Let them fail a little bit. Mm-hmm. Watch them in bat practice and go, I know what to do. Yeah. I know exactly what to do, but they need to feel the failure for a little bit. So 1 bag swing, 4 bag swings, 5 bag swings. Let them get frustrated. Yeah. Then when they finally walk up, what am I doing wrong? What does it feel like? Yeah. Try not to give instruction. Sure. I want them to tell me what it feels like. Yeah. You do the same thing.
We do.
asking them, okay, we're putting you through these exercises. What does that feel like? Do you want to know if it's painful or if there's pressure or anything like that too? But it's bigger than that too. You're trying to get the athlete to talk about what the action feels like. When we can get them talking, it's so much easier to give them feedback. Your swing's too long, dude. Shorten up. Just shorten up. Or it's like, okay, relax your elbow. Now try. What does that feel like? Okay, good. Now I can connect to what is that feeling of? Describe it to me. It feels terrible. It feels long. Long. So let's go short. For you, it's the same kind of thing. When they start talking, talk to your parents, whatever, it doesn't matter. Then you can finally get to the, okay, well, then if it hurts when you do it out here, let's drop it down. And you get that feedback. You got to have dialogue with the athlete.
Absolutely. I tell all my patients, clients right here that what we do, like sports physical therapy, sports rehab, is not effective unless there is dialogue. If you don't give me feedback on what worked, what didn't work, what you like, what you don't like, this does not work. I can make a very good educational guess on what's going to work, but it doesn't mean that it works for you as efficiently as for the next person. So that feedback is so important. And what you mentioned earlier too, with just letting an athlete kind of go through it, you know what to do, you know what to change. In the rehab world, we do that in here as well. We use force plates in here where we can use it on a biofeedback setting where, let's say, somebody has a hip injury or a core injury and now they're getting back to squatting, right? And very often, or an ankle injury and getting back to squatting and they're putting more weight on the uninjured leg. However, they're not realizing it. We're putting them on the force plates, and the system will tell them right in front of them in real life how much weight they're putting on each leg. And they now have to kind of figure out, how do I shift my weight towards my injured side slightly to put a little more weight on it? I mean, sometimes we're talking about 3, 4, 5% differences, right? In the big scheme of things, those are not big differences. Over and over and over again, every day, week after week, month after month, that becomes a big issue. And that's where that internal feedback, I can coach them, right? But if they visualize themselves, and at the same time, if they are now, this is what it feels like, and repeat it over and over and over and over again, today, tomorrow, next day, we keep repeating it, eventually the body is going to develop those pathways again, and it's going to normalize over time.
Right, 100%.
You can't expect it to happen in one day. It takes repetition, just like sport-specific skills, what you do with your athletes.
No, it's interesting. The force plates, so you stand on it, and it shows you how much force. There's a measurement right there. There's data that you can look at.
That is data.
That is data. It's like, okay, obviously we're out of balance. And then talking with the athlete, and of course, objectively, you're looking at it going, okay, the form is right. So as the parents, the big takeaway for the parents and coaches that watch us and the athletes, choosing exercises, they're putting it in a simple framework. It's not hard. It's used. This is what we went to college for, And what they're doing is they'll choose something, stripping away as much of that camouflage as they can, say, okay, let's give it a try, and they're going to have to implement this into their program, and then eventually get where they test it and see, are the weighted balls working for me? Is this particular band workout or force production workout is this Bowflexy thing, is it working for me? Objectively, does it look right? Is there data I can measure of some sort? And then what does it feel like from the athlete? And it may work for them. It may not. If it doesn't, hopefully you've done it within 30 days, you can send it back and run that. And kind of go from there. But overall, it's pretty simple. And to kind of put a bow on this thing, when they're searching on the internet, don't spend the money yet. Spend the money first. Make it a $110 appointment with you, so you can do an evaluation on where their body is. You can design a program for them that'll fit not only what they're doing, if they're 5'2" or they're 6'2", addressing instabilities, all that kind of stuff. For $110, that's not a lot of money to get a a directed feedback plan on it. You're always going to find something, glute instability, always find something they would have never known about. So don't spend the money on the internet stuff first. Spend $110 with you to see where the body lines up. Then all you've got to do is basically say, okay, fine, we go through this, and then if you do find something in it, you plug it into the same framework that you and I work with.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you just plug it into the same dadgum thing, observe it, measure it, get the athlete's feedback, and that's how they figure out what to buy, what to not buy.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Right.
That's the goal. So
it's pretty easy.
in my opinion, it is.
Well, brother, I appreciate your time. We're going to do a bunch more of these. We're going to wrap this one up for the day. And again, I thank you for sitting down with me. And if they want to get a hold of you, can they send you an email?
They can send me an email. It's my email is jan@stpetept.com.
I'll put it on the screen. jan@stpetept.
Sorry.
Jan at
stpete
St. Pete PT.com. So it's stpetept.com.
Yes.
It'll be on the screen. That's a big deal.
Yes, or you can go on our website. It's very easy on there. It's got a button on there for request an appointment. That doesn't mean that you get scheduled right away. It just sends a notification that you want to have an interest, or that there may be something going on. You put your phone number in there. We will reach out to you.
Right.
So
And even if you're not in St. Pete,
even
go
if
on the internet, send it right, and then go from there. And talk to them.
Absolutely.
Dude, you're the man.
I appreciate it.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you.